Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Um, Today, we're going to talk about something that a lot of us are feeling, but not always talking about. And then this morning, at not a very normal hour, I got to looking through LinkedIn. And I saw Dan Roberts' post. Dan talked today about what really will separate great CIOs from the rest in 2026. For me, a big part of the answer lives right here in what we're talking about today. How do we close the gap between how we operate, how we sell, how customers buy, how our teams deliver? The sales gap is widening, but it's not because of lack of AI. I think it's because of a lack of context, experience, and alignment. Where everywhere we look, AI promises to revolutionize everything. We have more tools and more dashboards, more data than ever, but deals are still slowing down. Buying groups are keep getting bigger. Operations are getting more lack. Risk keeps going up, and the distance between what's promised and what's actually delivered feels wider than it did 5 years ago. From here, I think leaders who are under pressure to hit numbers to make their operations better lean harder on the pitch than the problem. Procurement leaders are under pressure to manage cost and risk and end up being labeled the blocker. CIOs and IT leaders stuck in the middle between sales promises, procurement scrutiny, and operational reality. From the procurement supply chain and from the start of sales, today we're going to talk about how to make that gap a lot shorter. So joining me today is a very good friend of mine, Dan Halukis, the CIO, the co-founder of Source to One. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Robert.
Dan is a global procurement and supply chain executive with 25 years of guiding strategic sourcing, operations, and value creation across Fortune 500 and PE-backed organizations, including Apollo Global Management, Yahoo, Warner Brothers, Discovery, Philip Morris, and more. He has a doctorate in global supply chain, 13 years in faculty procurement and leadership, and deep insights on how organizations grow, evaluate risk, and long-term partnership. Thanks, Dr. Dan.
Thanks, Robert.
Next, I'd like to bring a new friend, DJ Martin. DJ is a C-suite commercial leader with deep expertise across sales, procurement, finance, and delivery. For most of his career, he's operated directly under CEOs and CFOs aligning commercial strategy, pricing, and operations at the enterprise level. Most recently served as a global chief information officer at a high-growth SaaS and payments platform. With leadership roles across ad tech, media agencies, and global brand, DJ is known for bridging the gap between how companies sell, how enterprises buy, and how value is delivered. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then rounding out our group today is someone that really needs no introduction. And it's been with the Institute for a while now, is Jessica Carroll. Jessica, a good longtime friend, former CIO, Chief Experience Officer, multiple organizations, and founder of JCX Strategies. Jessica Carroll solves the communication operational gap. She's the one I go to for all my CX needs. Between internal teams, customers, and vendor partners, Jessica is dedicated to help organizations build stronger internal cultures, improve customer relationships, and drive sustainable business growth through our customer-centric engagement framework. Welcome, Jessica.
So nice to see you.
It's been nice to have you here. I appreciate this. I appreciate all three of you being here. I'd like to actually launch this conversation off today with Jessica, and especially in light of reading Dan's post last night, Dan Roberts' post last night about what separates good leaders in 2026 is just when you were in the CIO suite, off in the middle of all of the sales, promise, scrutiny, and operational reality, what gap hit you the hardest?
This is going to sound so simple, but it's just lack of communication and lack of understanding of everyone's point of view. I mean, you're on the IT side, you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to bring in technology to do that. From the procurement side, typically they're looking to make sure that they're getting the best deal. And from the operational side, a lot of times the ops team is very much left out of the actual final product and proposal that comes along, and are kind of stuck in the spot of having to deliver on something that maybe they didn't have a huge say in the first place. So I think it's, if you can just make sure that there's a good understanding between what is being proposed, all the details behind the technology for that and how it's going to be delivered. So pulling in the ops team to help the sales group, the procurement team, and leadership understand what's really going to happen on day one. I think it's just so critical. And I think bringing procurement along in that conversation is so helpful early, because then they have a stake right from the beginning and an understanding of why you as the IT leader are trying to bring this product or tool in.
Thanks, Jessica. I think it's, and I'd love for everyone to jump in and respond to that. But I think realistically, based on your procurement gap, and I'd like to just, Dan, your thoughts on that and the sales gap, what it looks like from your inbox and your meetings and bridging that, the sale and CIO, then the technology spend.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. For me, it's being inundated with emails and phone calls from sales reps from different suppliers, and as we're having conversations or we start talking, it's the sales pitch that I get, and it's not the connection or basically the empathy. Hey, it's more about here's the product, here's what we're trying to sell versus what are your pain points, what keeps you up at night, and trying to understand my perspective. And I think, as we get into it, we'll talk about it, but that to me is one of the biggest missing pieces right now.
Thanks, Dan. So DJ,
Yeah.
When you hear and this communication gap of the sales, when you hear the sales gap is widening, what does it mean to you in your world? Sales, procurement, IT?
Yeah, I mean, and I've sat on both sides of the table, kind of being a chief commercial officer. So when I hear it whining, it's not about lack of effort. I think actually buyers, they're bigger buying teams. They're more complicated, but they do speak different languages, even internally. The sellers, I think, are actually working harder, but they're working with less. I mean, you see a bunch of layoffs left and right. So to me, the gap that is widening is really because, to Dan's point and Jessica's point, there's not really framing the deal and ultimately what the outcome is. It's a lot of still talking feature sets, I'm selling this product, that product, but not leaning in to actually understand what's keeping the business up at night and how can I solve that problem in a simplistic way.
See, I love that. I'm sorry to just jump in there, Rob, but I think that's the critical piece. And so well said, DJ. I think missing out on what is it we're trying to do at the end, and not just like how it gets implemented, but what is the purpose? I mean, technology is only here for us to help run our businesses better, right? Or to deliver something better to a customer. So without understanding what is it that we are hoping to see at the end of this, what the value is at the end, and focusing on that and getting everyone aligned around that, that's really the key, I think. So DJ, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when I look at good, strong commercial people, regardless of what side of the table they're on, they're good at framing what the outcome is, and remove friction from the business. So I've seen cases where people make the mistake, especially with large, we're going to try to bypass procurement because I have a strong relationship with the business. That's a mistake. Finance, legal, procurement, they all have veto power. So the best commercial leaders actually take the time, even in a one-on-one setting, to truly understand, okay, if it's Dan, a CPO, what's in his head? Like, what risk is he trying? What does he have to defend when he goes back internally to sell the case and to sell the deal? So really starting to unpick, I think in this current environment with people doing so much more, so less, that step, that requirement is kind of being skipped.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that real quick, I look at, the folks on the sales side almost need to be a confidant to the CPO, right? Someone that we can trust and can empathize with what we're going through. And I think that to me is one of the biggest gaps as well.
So it's not only us. We see some comments coming in from the audience that are agreeing with us. And in theory, and the way we like things happen, this communication is very apparent to all of us, right? This is what we see happen and how we should fix it. But so DJ, tell me, from your perspective, what are 2 or 3 things that great commercial leaders do to help their teams navigate that deal and getting beyond the pitch to make sure that the communications are flowing all the way across the whole life cycle?
Well, I think number one I kind of brought up was you got to frame it. You got to frame what the outcome is. I tell people, and I know it's kind of archaic now talking about slides, but you shouldn't be providing your solution until 8 slides. I mean, you really want to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And then step 2 is, try to remove any friction within the internal buying team. Like I still see, CIOs speak in one language, procurement speaks in slightly different, legal slightly different. And there's a different ways to be able to, have a coffee. I mean, you can find different ways to get an audience to understand what's really driving and what success is or what success will be viewed from each of those different perspectives. And then it's delivery. You got to deliver on what you promise. So it's just driving through and making sure the implementation, because you want the renewal.
So for the Dan, then procurement, I'm not going to say is the blocker, but sometimes perceived as such. And maybe it's just stereotype, but from your experience, what is usually going on in a deal would make something stall in procurement or make them feel like it's you guys that are not making things happen?
Yeah, it's definitely not procurement. Procurement is the funnel point, but it's other departments that we have to work with. It's legal to get approvals. It's finance to get budget approvals. It's the business as well, based on the scope. So we're basically the facilitation. We're the facilitator. We're the tool in the process, and we make the recommendations, which are heard by upper management. But we're never the bottleneck, even though we're perceived to be. We're actually trying to push it forward faster and get it done more expeditiously. And the perception is that we're the holdup, and it's actually the opposite. We're actually trying to really, really get it done quickly, effectively, and with quality as well.
Jessica, I'd like you to wait. I'm sorry, Dan, you were going to add to that?
No, I was just going to add on to that, again, kind of from different perspectives, is ultimately I think procurement is the one that has to defend the deal internal to their business. Like, I understand legal does from a risk perspective, compliance, but procurement actually has to defend it with the finance and the business. So I think they're perceived as a bottleneck, but that's where you got to get alignment with them early up front. Bring them into the table. Like, don't let someone say, "Oh, try to circumvent." That is just going to cause delay after delay to get the deal across the finish line.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, to that point, it's scope and budget, right? Scope and budget are what brings us in early, and most of the time we're not in that phase. We're either rubber stamping at the end or we're somewhere in the middle. So that's a great point.
So scope is
from the CIO's perspective, procurement rather can sometimes be a shield when other business partners are trying to bring in a deal. I mean, let's not pretend that doesn't happen, right? IT should be bringing in the technology, but other elements of the business are doing that at times. And procurement can be sort of that. I don't want to say bad cop role, but definitely in a position to be a neutral force in determining whether that deal is really a good one, and that can help the tech team sort of slow down something that perhaps they see some danger with as far as being good for the business. So it can be a benefit to the CIO if the partnership and that communication is there between them.
So John, can you pop up the last comment again, if you don't mind, please? So I don't want to bastardize this name, but this understanding the problem is key. I really like this comment, and we talked about scope and we talked about communication out there. So just throwing this to you, from a scoping perspective, getting this aligned from what the need might be from the business, where you might be identifying it, and then going out to sales to find it, or procurement to process it. How are you communicating scope across the organization and your CX and CIO?
Well, as an IT leader, it's more, it's certainly the way that I viewed it is I need to be partnered with all of my business partners. Certainly at the time when I was in that role, not everyone was doing that in general in our industry as IT leaders. And what I found very helpful was to be in a position where I was meeting with them on a regular basis. And we were talking about technology and different initiatives that were happening. So I built relationships with the different team members across my peers across the organization. So that really helped. Like I said a minute ago, when, say, the marketing department has something that they want to bring in as a tool, it put me in a position to be their partner along with the legal team and the procurement team on why this was such a great product that we needed to bring into the organization. So it put me in a spot where it wasn't just me trying to push something forward into the organization. I had my business owner, I had legal, I had procurement. Everybody sort of was on the same page as to why this was valuable. So it was a lot of storytelling internally before we sat down to have a meeting about why we needed to do this.
Thanks, Jess. And All right, so this is a good perspective, right? Procurement are the facilitators of that purchasing process, right? And Dan, you and I have had this conversation pretty deeply over the past few months about the procurement purchasing process and where you fit in there. And Gat, so how are you? You know, I asked DJ earlier, but we're going to turn it to you. What are 2 or 3 things you do to make sure that what's happening in that process is communicated outwardly from procurement to make sure that this process moves smoothly?
Yeah, it's really about its communication with the business and the stakeholders, right? On what the intent is, what's to DJ's point, what's the problem we're trying to solve. You know, it's not just procurement trying to save the company money, right? We also need to insulate the company against risk. So vetting the suppliers, making sure they're qualified, making sure there's no pending litigation. There's all these checks that we do, and their financial stability. There's much more to it than, you know, us negotiating a deal. And it goes beyond that. And I think us communicating the value that we have and that we could bring to a company internally and to the supplier, I think is critical.
Thanks, Dan. So, DJ, we talked earlier, you know, I'd like to bring some practical experience into some of this stuff. And as Dan's facilitating that process, what if you're in your current role and you're coaching a seller who's about to bring something to a CPO and you want to make sure that they ask the right questions. So what are the top 3 questions you think a seller should ask when they're going to CPO?
I think, you know, as best as you can, put it in your own words, but you're trying to understand what success looks like. What's the outcome that they're doing? So Dan is a facilitator, procurement. He's pulling the requirements across the businesses. Legal is trying to get in a better understanding what is going to be deemed a success or the desired outcome. Then it's about framing it and saying, okay, that's great. Now, how do I help you de-risk? Because ultimately, you're going to be the one that has to sell this internally. So it's, again, understanding from a procurement specific perspective, what information, how do I help him navigate his own organization to keep the momentum going? Because I think ultimately, if you're working towards a deal, everyone wants to get a good deal done. I don't think there's any bad players saying, oh, we just want to stop this. Like, you're engaged, everyone's investing time. So it's helping them de-risk it, to be able to sell it internally. And then it's, you know, ultimately it's a tactical question. What does that deal kind of look like? I'm never afraid to, like, you know, ask and to say, okay, how does it need to look? Like, not, you know, technically, how does the actual deal need to look? Like, from a cash flow perspective, from a cost perspective, from an integration perspective, like, and timelines. So getting, you know, really trying to pull threads from the CPO to get some better understanding, considering I'm basically an outsider looking at.
Dan, those questions come to you. How are you responding?
Yeah, I mean, the same way. I think, you know, it's about partnership, communication, trust. And I always look at this as being genuine, right? How do we build genuine trust among ourselves and others as quickly as possible? And to the earlier point, it's understanding what keeps us up at night, what our pain points are, and how to solve those problems, you know, in a partnership manner.
So it's critical. You can't lose that and everything. Yes.
Hey, Ralph, I just want to give this another spin too. So from the perspective of the vendor, the partner vendor that is trying to sell into an organization and trying to not only get IT on board, so let's assume IT is on board, but get procurement and the other groups on board as well. I think one of the things that is really helpful as the outsider trying to sell in is to be really judicious about creating sort of the material and stories for the IT or the other business leader that is trying to bring the product in. Give them material that they can then go use internally and do the selling. Because at the end of the day, you as the person trying to get this product sold, you're not there all of the time. Your CIO is the one that has to go forward to procurement and really sell them at the end of the day, or whatever group it may be. So arm your CIO or whoever your business partner is with the material they need to go sell internally. Don't assume that they are going to remember everything that you've said. Give them something that puts them in a position to win that conversation.
I think that's a good point, Jessica, real quick, because I think there's this, you know, misnomer out there that people go through the CIO, and that's good enough, right? And they don't provide all that information, because the CIO, as you know, has to get approval from the CTO. The CTO has to get approval from the CFO to release the funds. and the CFO is going to go to the recommendation of the CPO on whether it's a bid, single source negotiation, make versus buy, whatever it is. And the CFO 9 times out of 10 is going to trust the CPO, tell the CTO, work with procurement, right, to get this solved. And that's why, to your point, having the CIO well prepared and well versed in this and connected to the CPO is critical.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because in my previous company, mentor colleague of mine, we called it surround the sale. Surround the sale. Like you need to be, if IT is more, and I'm just making up, integration. Okay, tell the story of how this is going to be, how it's going to integrate, how it's going to be simpler. It's going to make their life simpler. From a procurement perspective, it could be about the risk. Dan brought it up before, going back, and for legal it could be different, but you have to have those stories. It's all about storytelling, and I think that's where there's a lack of experience in the marketplace today, but I think it's that storytelling that actually gets the deals driven home quicker.
And as Michael has pointed out here, the deals get driven home if they're done in the right time frame, as well as you're talking about here. And what's becoming more and more apparent, and maybe it's not always seen outside the organization, there's a lot of process that happens here to make sure it's done right. And it's not bad process, it's quality. It's right.
Well, I love that comment too. And it goes back, I think we were talking about this earlier. You've got to make sure that the people that are going to be there implementing it are in a position to do so. And if they've not seen all of the details of the deal before it closes, you're just throwing this over the wall to them. And now it's on their hands once the deal is closed to make it work. Well, maybe they could have given you some good advice up front from a delivery perspective that would have solved problems and could have been put into the deal in the first place. So I'm a big believer in the people that are going to go ahead and deliver this, even if they're, not at the C-suite level, bring them into the conversation. They're probably the best people to help you make sure you're doing it right.
And I think that's important for sellers too, because if that doesn't work, the operational, that's a black eye for the seller, like for that company. It gets a bad reputation. So, and it's not under their control. So I think that's important, this surrounding the sale.
Yes.
And both a friend of DJ and mine, Ryan Crosby, really, really strong CEO, brings up a great point here also. Prioritization by revenue generation or the products they're bringing in, profit margin, internal, right? Making sure that we have the right priority of the product we're bringing in as well. So I appreciate that comment, Ryan. Here we have a question. Many enterprise deals stall not because of price, but because of uncertainty around value realization. Ryan just talked about that, right? And we have mentioned already. What do best-in-class vendors do to reduce uncertainty early in the process, and what do we wish more vendors understood? So, DJ, do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's framing what the business issue they're trying to solve and what success looks like, and understanding that from the parties, from the buying team. So, if you don't have that, you're just chasing your tail. So up front, you have to invest the time to understand, what you're actually trying to sell, not the products or features.
Dan, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about value creation too, I think about price, quality, service, right? Not just price, but I think about how are you going to make the business more successful, not just by saving money, but by helping them, support their goals, their strategies better. To me, it's the entire support of the business needs is what it is.
Yeah, I love this. I love this one because in more recent years as a CXO and sort of sitting in between sales, delivery, and the customer, I think one of the things that was really eye-opening to me is how little, not just sales, but everyone within the organization I was working for understood what the customer was really saying and what they really needed. I think it's super important to go into a deal understanding what does the customer actually need? And let me try to kind of surround that, because it's got to be valuable enough that once it's in place, they want to come back for more. I actually think it's better go in smaller with a quick win. So sell in small and grow from there. Show them that you are a great partner, and that your product, your services, your support is really going to bring them the outcomes and the value that they're after. And once you've done that, you guys were using the word trust before. Once that trust is built, now you're a long-term partner, and the deals will get bigger and better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the tip of the spear kind of strategy works for a lot of companies. And for me, it's also about making it simple. Like, make it simple to do business amongst each others, because there's a real cost to doing business. Keep it simple, and then you grow from there. Like, that's how you build trust. You deliver on what you say, and you keep it simple to work with.
Easy is always the best path to get there. So Jessica, let me ask you a question and put some reality into where this is taking place. But from your experience, you have the chief experience officer. Can you give an example of where you stepped in, had the connector to help prevent a bad deal, or maybe turn a good deal into a great long-term relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of examples of that. I think one of the more interesting ones was where it was a customer that was long-term customer of ours. They'd gone out for RFP, and internally the team really thought what they knew what they wanted to, sell to our existing customer. But when it came time to go over the RFP, the customer was pretty unhappy. And they really were pretty scathing on some of the ways that we had delivered and all of that stuff. And they weren't wrong. And, I'm listening to us try to convince the customer that they should buy more and stay with us, and hearing the customer really sort of like, you guys aren't listening to us. So honestly, I stopped the conversation. I'm like, we can't continue this. We need to go down a path where we solve the issues that the customer is bringing up. We can come back to the services later. And, we kind of did some, risk and improvement work over the next couple of months. The interesting thing about this is, as unhappy as this customer was initially, by the time we sort of got a few months in, they were realizing that we were there and actually hearing them. And not only did we win the RFP, but we got more business than they originally were planning on giving to us. So I think it comes back to really listening. We tend to, as humans, just hear what we think we want to hear. And I think it's important sometimes to just really take yourself out of that and be a neutral listener. And I think in this particular case, it certainly worked out for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, in the environment where sellers are put on a lot of pressure, they're reactive. They're just reacting to the fire. They're not actually taking time back anymore to take in, okay, what caused it and how do I fix that for the long term? So I couldn't agree more.
I love the story and the support. So Dan, let me ask you a question, especially working now with Source for One. What can you tell great commercial sales leaders that do differently when they engage procurement early, and versus those who treat you as the final hurdle just to get over?
One of my previous mentors used to always say, if you're talking, you're not listening. And if you're not listening, you're not learning. So I think that a lot of times, sales folks, DJ always says the shiny new toy. They start talking about what they can do and what they have and who they know and all this. And you never hear, like I said earlier, how can we help? Right? How can we help you? And what are your goals? And, that's kind of what sparked our whole initiative with Source to One is, I never, in my career, I've never had an ex-CPO sitting across the table from me in a supplier sales call telling me, I know what you went through. I just went through it. Here's some advice. Here's how to address transformation or digitalization. I never had that. And as I talked to my CPO contacts, they never had it either. So there's a need, for that connection. And the best way is to have the right people on the other side of the table.
Thanks, Dan. That's real good advice. So and this is a generic question, but I'll go to each one of you because I really would love from your perspective. What is, and we talk a lot about trust, what is the one behavior you see from leaders that might kill trust across the functions, and one behavior that might build it much quicker? So Dan, you're up on the screen. You want to hit that one first?
Yeah, I mean, for trust, it's got to be, I always say it has to be genuine, right? You have to, and if you want to build it fast, there has to be concerted effort that's perceived as genuine. And if it's not, if you feel like you're getting a sales pitch, you feel like you're just another number and it doesn't feel customized, to me, it's not going to be real. And I always relate it to, visiting somebody face to face, taking them out to lunch, asking them how their weekend was, whatever it was, trying to build some sort of rapport that's beyond business, and establish a relationship up front. So for me, that's critical. If I feel that effort from someone that they actually care about me as a person versus a statistic, then the trust can start to build quicker after that.
Thanks, Dan. DJ, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I think Dan's hitting it. It's like authenticity. Is a person authentic? Do they follow through on their commitments? And quite frankly, are they easy to work with? Like there's not hidden agendas. Transparency is key, especially in my media background. Transparency is key. So it's authenticity, follow through, and transparency.
Thanks, DJ. Jessica, any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that, and certainly this was luckily for me, the role that I was supposed to play, but, I would meet with the CIO, the head of procurement, of our customers on a regular basis. And it wasn't meetings to come in and talk about our services. It was literally for me to sit down for half an hour and listen to them. And the point was really not just to get to know them, but to give them a sounding board and have a conversation that had some value and meaning to them. Again, even the procurement head, it is literally getting into a position, as you guys were just saying, like the face-to-face, having a conversation that kind of breaking it down, like we're just humans. We all have goals and things we're trying to do, and being a good listener and person to have interest in what you as the customer has to say. I think taking the time to do that is really important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for that quick one. So DJ, back to you for a quick minute. Do you see a place where commercial and sales leaders do differently when they engage procurement early? From your perspective, I know we hit this with Dan a little bit before, but at what point are you trying to engage across that organization?
Oh, as early as I get a contact. Like they are, as I think is set up before, it's a facilitator. So just as important as the business owner that I'm selling to and working with and probably have the relationship with, I want to know who procurement is. And for that matter, at the right time, I want to know who legal is. I need to know the players. And the sooner you can do that, the more time you have to do what we just talked about, to build a relationship, to, sit down for 30 minutes, whatever, understand what's going to de-risk the deal getting done. So as soon as possible.
So I asked you that to set you up a little bit for this one. So you're getting in there early, and is there a time where you've seen someone walk into an organization and trying to sell a product or a service or something, and the salesperson wasn't aligned with the rest of the business? How do you get them to pivot and collaborate better? And how would you coach them to do that?
For the salesperson?
For the person starting off the process, commercial officer, salesperson, etc. That beginning of that sales process when they're not aligned.
Yeah, so I have a unique background where I actually sat in the procurement seat for a while. So I find out about that early on, and I'm course correcting, and I'm trying to do a repair of damage because I understand where the procurement person would feel if they felt like they were circumvented. So it's really a repair job, not a kind of you just have to react. But I've had people in my past, senior people, say, "Oh, I don't want to talk to procurement. I know the business owner will get the deal done." And I have to shake my head. I'm like, you don't know what you're in for. Like I said, finance, legal, and procurement all have veto power. So get them engaged now.
So Dan and DJ, I'm going to ask you to potentially react to what Jessica said here, but I do think this is an interesting conversation, especially for a large audience. So Jessica, what do you wish the sales and procurement leaders understood better about the constraints and opportunities on the IT side?
Well, on the sales side, I sort of talked about this before, but I'll just sort of repeat it and recap it. I think it's important for sales to really be able to listen to what the customer needs and not so much what you're trying to sell. So that would be, sort of step one. Really figure out what is going to benefit, what they're saying they need, and what, where the help is needed. Focus on that, as opposed to trying to sell them everything that you've got. On the procurement side, the one thing that I wish, and this is, perhaps it was just my experience with a couple of these individuals, but I think that they were motivated by their bonuses on how much cost cutting they could do. And it definitely had impact on their ability to look at the bigger deal and the advantage to the company. So obviously we want to make sure we're getting the best price as a buyer, but sometimes that doesn't mean you're getting the best deal long-term. So short-term gain on the cost cutting, long-term problems, because you may not have the best support and delivery that you need. So I would say to procurement, yes, of course we want to get the best deal, but have we looked at the whole life cycle, and is the vendor that we're choosing, even if they may be a little bit more expensive, do they have a better way to support and service the organization long term?
Thanks, Jessica. Dan, do you
Yeah, I
have
think I was going to say that's important. That's framing the deal for success, because it be fair, put a procurement hat on. If it comes down to I'm just looking for the lowest price, then it's a commodity. Then I'm being treated as a commodity. So I need to change that narrative very quickly, because to your point, the best price doesn't mean the cheapest price. Best price means I'm getting the best price for the total value that I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, like I was saying, it's not just price, it's quality and service. But, I hate to say it, but kind of shame on those procurement people a little bit, because at the end of the day, it's about the strategic partnership, and procurement should be putting together a category strategy in collaboration with the business's strategy, so they could come out with, one strategy for both. And when you have a supplier that might be charging more, but it's going to service the business better, be more long term, and then eventually you can get those discounts off it. You can fold more business under it from a rationalization standpoint and get better economies of scale from it. It's got to be looked upon that way. And the requirements have to come from the business, not procurement. I always say procurement doesn't own the budget, right? The business does. So they have to bring those requirements to procurement, and procurement needs to support those holistically.
Thanks, Dan. Another comment from Ryan: business strategy, freaking goals change, drive IT innovation, not the way around. True, it's not about, procurement doesn't own the budget, but IT also doesn't own the solution. IT solution needs to fix a problem, not just shiny new toy they're trying to sell it. Understanding the customer, client, and their business strategies, and go from there. Trust starts with listening and understanding. A very easy, simple approach, and very hard to follow. It's a long-term relation, not transactional sale. Clients want partners in the journey and putting skin in the game. Ryan, this is great advice, and it humbles the role of the show that we're just here to deliver a service, not what is internal to what we think should be done, but everybody should be done. Any thoughts and comments before I to Ryan's comment?
No, I totally agree with him. I've talked to him about it, so it's 100%. And I said, like, whether where you're sitting on the table or whatever, if you're going to go through the deal, I want someone that's going to be there when I pick up the phone and I need help. And if I feel like I've gotten raked over the coals from a procurement, from a pricing perspective, or whatever, or from whatever, I'm not going to necessarily be the first one to pick up the phone. So you need trust. You need to have that relationship. That's the key for any of these partnerships.
And I'm going to go back to, sitting in the head of IT spot. You're right. You need somebody that's going to be there. Somebody's going to be there whenever there's a problem. I mean, I was in situations where it's the weekend or it's late at night, and we had events happening with the organization I was with. I needed my vendor to be there, like, fix it now, regardless of time of day of the week. And that's where, a great partnership with a vendor is so important. Again, it's bigger than cost cutting. You need somebody that's going to pick up the phone and have ways to solve the problem.
Yeah, I got one of the best lines I had from one of my suppliers was, "I sleep with my cell phone under my pillow." Right. So I'll be there for you any time of the day. And that to me is something I always remember. So I totally agree with that, Jessica.
I've heard from friends, and I post often. I talk about AI's applied imagination, and this is not the anti-AI show. But it is reinforcing trust, communication, people skills, and AI as an enabler, or people on steroids, and it's not the man in the middle. I think we have another question. So interesting question, and depending on the size of the organization, you might have a formal procurement department or not. But Dan, let's start with you. When dealing with a start, and both sides, right? From a startup coming into your organization, how does that change in procurement?
You mean as far as what a startup company should do in procurement?
I'm assuming that this is procurement dealing with startups. So you've been
Yeah, I mean,
these organizations.
when it comes to pre-qualifying a supplier, it's not about not listening to a Joe's Electronics. I always say, right? We want to be fair and equitable when considering suppliers. As far as what they can do to be heard more is really how they're going to go above and beyond the scope, right? Because they have more flexibility than larger suppliers do because they're a startup. They'll be able to do more and kind of bend more. So that's something I'd be looking to see, right? How are you competing with the big suppliers? You might not have the client list, but what can you do above and beyond to separate yourself from the rest?
I think my engagement with startups, actually being involved with one, is getting, again, back to where we started this conversation, understand the business problem you're trying to solve. So it's not like, especially what they had, there's so much innovation, there's a lot of products, but some of these engagements, it's just, you need some people with experience to pull on threads. Like their value proposition and what they're selling from a feature is not probably what's going to land within the business, regardless of if it's the business owners, procurement, finance, what have you. So it's really kind of engaging in thinking, taking a step back and what we said, understand the business problem that you're trying to solve for. Why did you create this product?
And I can see from the buyer's perspective, and certainly procurement's going to feel this, that you're trying to manage the risk here. And if it's an organization that's a startup or small, sometimes it's it can be a little bit scary to commit to do that. But the flip side of that is they can be more nimble, and some of our larger vendors tend to have more difficulty, like I said before, being there when you need them to, and available and ready to help you. Sometimes it's easier with a smaller group.
Totally agree.
Absolutely agree. So, work. As we're getting near the end of our show, so I want to save a little bit of time. Dan, tell me how can people find you if they're looking for you?
Source to one, which is SOURCE, the number 2, ONE.com.
So Dan, one of our last questions before we have everyone else give their information. What are one things that leaders should start doing better to connect sales, procurement, and IT?
I think it's kind of what we've been saying and what DJ is saying. It's understanding the problem, right? Understanding the pain points and addressing those from the start. And that's kind of what, as I said, kind of prompted this really, is making the connection, diving in. DJ always says we're players and coaches, right? It's really kind of understanding, getting involved side to side in the trenches and digging in. And yet still being able to rise up 30,000 feet and provide the strategic value as well.
So it's always a partnership. Dan, thank you. DJ, how about you for our last question? But first, how can people find you if they're looking for you as well?
You can find me at source21.com as well. As far as being a better leader, it is kind of, you got to demonstrate your roll up your sleeves. Be a sounding board for sales, procurement, whatever. Be a sounding board, listen, and you leverage your experience and kind of help them navigate. Like I said, I think it's not a lack of effort on buying teams or selling teams to try to get a deal done. I think the deals are just more complicated. There's more people involved. But then there's less resources actually to do work. It's kind of a weird contrast, but it's true. So I think it's, be there for your team, be a mentor, but roll up your sleeves and do some work and help them navigate through. And then hopefully through that effort, the next one, they'll be better prepared. Your timing requirements dissipate.
Thanks, DJ.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jeff, thank you again for being here. But so, how can, besides the Institute for Digital Transformation as a fellow, how can people find you, Jessica?
Yeah, you can find me at jcxstrategies.com. So, I do work outside of the fellow organization and happy to chat with people anytime about some of these issues. I think in answer to your question, we've talked a lot about, being a connector, but the other piece that I think is a part of that is actually getting these teams to talk to each other. Right. So getting sales and procurement and the delivery team involved in their own conversations about what's going on in the perspective. So, sort of you as the leader, making everybody else communicate, not just you communicating outward, but to bring them in and for them to understand each other and their position. That is really, really effective in getting people to work together and come up with solutions on, whatever it is you're trying to solve in general. But in this particular case, if everybody understands the other person's perspective a little bit better, they're going to be more likely to contribute to the deal in a way that's productive.
Thank you, Jessica. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I really think this is a great episode, and I appreciate Dan for bringing this to light and wanting to have this conversation, and DJ and Jessica for stepping up and showing up. But before I close the show for the year, I want to do a special shout out to John Palinkas, Franklin, from the Institute of Digital Transformation. They push me, they make me better, and they really do a good job in putting these things together. It was a great year. We saw some really great conversation from AI, cybersecurity, leadership, empathy, closing the sales gap, trust, which is I think a big theme for our entire year. And I look forward to conversations on storytelling, and hopefully I'll trick John into coming on air and doing one on quantum next year. But I do want to thank everyone for watching. This has been a great year. I'm thankful for you all and truly appreciative of the network and the platform. And I look forward to many great things in the coming year. So happy holidays, everyone. Happy New Year. You guys, same to you. Thank you. John, Frank, I love you. I appreciate everyone. We'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for joining Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation and hosted by Robert Field. Look for new episodes coming to a LinkedIn live session at noon on the second Tuesday of every month. Can't join Robert for the live session? You can catch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.